Pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Brian Tsuyoshi Takeda. Brian, I hope I have pronounced that correctly. I was practicing yesterday. Brian is a serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Restorae, which is dedicated to restoring marine ecosystems at scale. A previous founder of Urchinomics, which is a pioneering venture that turns overgrazing sea urchins into premium seafood while regenerating kelp forests. Brian has been recognized by UN Ocean Decade and awarded Ecopreneur of the Year by Salesforce. Brian brings a track record of blending ecological restoration with innovative business models. He also serves as head of reforestation at the Kelp Forest Foundation, a Netherlands-based nonprofit dedicated to advancing kelp research and restoration globally. Also involved with the Japan Blue Economy Association, advancing blue credit markets and ocean restoration worldwide. As you can see, Brian has many strings to his bow and his journey has been a fascinating one. So happy to hand over to you now, Brian, for the next 15 minutes or so. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just going to switch my screen here. Hoping everyone can see what I should be seeing, more or less. Yeah, you're good? Okay, great. So yes, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and engage with this wonderful network of nature positive ecopreneurs and stakeholders. I thought maybe I'd just do a very quick introduction of myself. So again, Brian Tsuyoshi Takeda, born in Japan, raised in Canada, studied in Chile, now work in the Netherlands and Norway. So all over the place. My background, I studied business at the Queen's University School of Business, and I am now based in a tiny little island on the west coast of Norway in a town called Ulsteinvik, which will come back later in my presentation. So today I was asked to talk a little bit about the various ventures that I'm involved in and maybe explain a little bit of the arc of how I got to what I'm doing and why I'm so dedicated to the oceans. But my first venture fresh after college was a company called Musi Tea. So I was originally supposed to go into investment banking, but after flying down to New York and having the meetings with investment bankers, I realized this was definitely not my tribe. So I hightailed it back and decided to start my first venture. My first venture was about bringing matcha green tea into the North American market. So matcha green tea, for those of you who are not familiar, it's the original tea that was consumed by Buddhist monks for over 1,000 years. And instead of steeping tea in water, it was actually ground into a fine powder and consumed whole. So you're effectively eating the tea as opposed to steeping it and just drinking the water-soluble nutrients. This green tea had a nutrition profile that was about 10 to 15 times higher than regular green teas. So it had a very unique health angle to it, but it was steeped, literally, pun intended, in conservative tradition, and it never really had the opportunity to pop the way it has in other markets. So what we tried to do is we tried to take the authenticity of the tea and the culture, but modernizing it and bring it into a very different context that the Western markets could appreciate. So we brought it into a lineup of tea products, including matcha being the central product, but we then found other applications for it, and we introduced it into smoothies, lattes, ice creams, which I'm sure many of you know today. But back in 2002, this was very much a new phenomenon. This was also before social media, so we had to use the old school ways to get the word out, and that was through celebrities. And so various celebrities that we worked with and were customers of ours helped spread the word through traditional media, and that got the concept of matcha spreading throughout North America. As a result of that effort, we were supplying in a B2B format some of the largest juice bar chains, some of the largest coffee chains, and essentially food and beverage operations throughout North America. We also were supplying companies like Estee Lauder for raw materials to go into their cosmetics line, as well as retail solutions for Coca-Cola and Whole Foods. So that was my first dab into entrepreneurship, and that really has nothing to do with nature, but this is essentially where I got started. My second venture, which is probably what I'm more known for, is Urchinomics. So Urchinomics is a venture that started off actually inspired from the earthquake in 2011 in Japan. After the tsunami, we learned from the scientists that when you lose predatory species, so in Japan's case, it was a tsunami that washed away predatory fish species, but in other places in the world, it's often the cause is overfishing. But once you lose the predatory pressure, sea urchins have a tendency to reproduce unhindered and reproduce and reproduce and reproduce, and ultimately overgraze entire kelp forests and turn them into marine deserts, like you see here in this picture. Um, so essentially, any country in the world that you could think of that has an active fisheries industry probably has some version of this type of urchin baron. So what Urchinomics did was we looked at these problematic urchin species not as a problem, but rather as an opportunity. So what we did was we harvested these sea urchins, which when sea urchins take over ecosystems and turn them into deserts, they become empty and starving. So they have no content. They don't have any of that valuable roe inside. So they were pretty much useless. But what we did was we used them as a raw material and we put them into our land-based aquaculture systems where we fed them a formulated feed. And within 10 weeks, we were able to convert them from an ecological pest to one of the world's most premium seafoods on the planet. So to put some numbers into perspective, we would pay fishers $5 a kilo for them to harvest the urchins. Within 10 weeks, we were able to sell it for $50 a kilo. When we processed that roe into pure roe products, we were talking of a market price of over $500 a kilo. So the value creation that we were able to do from an aquaculture perspective was the greatest economic value creation in the shortest amount of time, period. There is nothing that can compete with this yet. But as a result, what we were able to also do was take these urchin-dominated ecosystems that were very limited in biodiversity and no growth. By removing them, we were able to eliminate that pressure and allowed the kelp and the seaweed forest to come back. Now, once we quantified the amount of carbon that was sequestered through the restoration of these kelp forests, Urchinomics became the first company in the world to secure blue carbon credits for wild kelp restoration. Um, so this unique business model where the more we generate profits through our aquaculture activities, the better the environment becomes, was quite at the time, was quite a unique business model. And for that reason, we were recognized by the World Economic Forum and Uplink, the UN Oceans Decade, Salesforce, and Norway's Norgesved. This, of course, then attracted private equity capital and venture capital as well. So what started off as a small venture funded by myself and family offices, we managed to then get ocean-focused investors like Builders Vision and Cadman Capital Group, as well as corporate VCs that have strategic interests in securing either supply for their seafoods or decarbonizing in their ocean activities. And that's how we got NYK, ENEOS, and Sushiro on board. For those that are not familiar with Sushiro is the world's largest sushi chain. And so for them, having a steadily supply of sustainable or ecologically restorative sea urchin roe is a strategic play for them. For ENEOS and NYK lines, it was very much about decarbonization and restoring marine ecosystems while enjoying seafood. My third venture, which is the venture that I'm working on now, is a company that we call Restorae. And Restorae focuses specifically on taking existing business models and kind of aikidoing or so using their momentum to change the trajectory of the venture from an extractive one to a restorative one. With the ultimate goal of being that we want to make restorative ventures investable, profitable, and scalable. So essentially not just be some R&D project, but really get some meat onto it so that it can actually have some meaningful change on our planet. How do we do that? We do that through two basic philosophical approaches. One is to develop and invest in restorative technologies, so technologies that can amplify the scale and speed of restoration, as well as restorative business models. So business models where, again, much like Urchinomics, the more we generate profits, the better the environment becomes. To give some examples of how we engage with that, in terms of our core focus is very much about developing and investing in restorative subsea marine technologies. So technologies that we see can turn marine deserts back into kelp forests or seaweed or seagrass meadows. So essentially turning what is effectively a sea urchin barren like this back into biodiverse kelp-based ecosystems. We're also looking at supporting aerial technologies, where we collaborate with a company called Distant Imagery. And here, as you can see in the picture, the drones are not made out of the classic carbon fiber materials, but rather made out of wood and recycled plastics. The idea being that the drones should be modular and able to be built by communities in the global south and have a cost profile that is much more affordable so that it can actually be deployable in developing countries. So these drones are now being used to plant mangrove seeds in the deserts and forests. And with aerial technologies, you can plant 3 to 4 thousand mangrove trees in 3 to 5 minutes, where manual planting will take maybe do tens of trees an hour. So it's a very different geometric scale. And of course, that is ultimately to restore mangrove forests. This is one of my other favorite projects. So this is the Blue Wilding project in Norway, where we first are acknowledging the fact that the loss of predatory species is one of the main reasons why we have a trophic cascade and a collapse of marine ecosystems. So, okay, if we're losing them, well, why don't we figure out a way to put them back? So we now have wolffish babies getting ready to be reared and put back into the oceans. Not only are we trying to understand the biology behind this, but also making sure that the regulatory framework is ready and is prepared for us to be able to put nature back into the oceans and rewild. I mean, we as a society have become experts at taking and killing things from the ocean. So I think it's about time that we try to develop our expertise in bringing life back into our oceans. And of course, the ultimate goal is to have these guys back into our oceans, bringing balance back into our seas. We also collaborate on other areas that are not our core competence. So we support other ventures that we feel are aligned with our missions. So in terms of tidal technologies, we work with Blue Carbon Party, marine biotechnologies with C6, material biotechnologies. This one I think is really cool. So this is a company that is producing PFAS alternatives, organic PFAS alternatives using seaweed as a raw material. Yeah, and we also have a host of other nonprofit initiatives that we support. Policy advocacy, science advocacy, citizen science, regulatory advocacy, essentially all the kind of stuff that we need to, in parallel, move the needle in order for restorative ventures to succeed and have the right climate to succeed. The reason why I'm able to do this is because I have managed to port my previous investor relationship agreement through my multiple companies, where I commit 60% of my time to my core venture, and I get 40% of my time to spend on whatever I want that helps save the planet. And that is the investment agreement that I have with my investors. And only on those conditions do I allow investors to join my ventures. So I kind of carved out that flexible time so that, without having performance metrics, I can use my judgment to say, okay, I like that venture, I like that initiative, I'm going to support it, and I'm going to do what I can to make that happen. In terms of timing, why am I doing this now in particular? I'll highlight a few key points. I won't go into the details, but many of this I'm sure you're all aware. We have, of course, the global agreements like the Paris Agreement and the Convention of Montreal. But I think what is more relevant to today is actually some of the regulations that are coming through in the European Union, specifically the EU Restoration Law, as well as the direction where the carbon credits and nature credits are heading. The restoration law is requiring essentially 20% of both marine and terrestrial ecosystems to be improving from a degraded state by 2030 and then 100% by 2050. So this is incredibly ambitious given the fact that we have spent the last 150 years industrially destroying nature. So now, we're heading back to restoration, but it's pretty ambitious targets. Whether we can make it or not, I don't think is that important at this stage. I think the fact that we're heading in that direction is super critical. To buffer that or to support that, we're also seeing really, really powerful leadership coming from the EU about how these alternative mechanisms like carbon credits and nature credits, how they can help fund and support restorative initiatives. And of course, we saw recently at the UNOC the pledge of over a billion euros to coordinate the Ocean Pact and essentially figure out how we're going to do this as a supercontinent. But to kind of close, I wanted to maybe put a little bit of context of what all this means to me and my timing. So as I mentioned earlier, so I was born in Japan, but I was born in Japan after the war and after Japan got rich. when my parents emigrated to North America, we went to the cool part of North America, so Canada, not the US. And I now am married into a Norwegian family, and I now live here with, my slice of that 1.7 trillion sovereign wealth fund that has my back. So what that means to me is that the worst thing that could ever happen to me now is that I die middle class in the richest country in the world. That's the worst thing that could ever happen to me. So, given that, I feel that I have an obligation to pay this forward and find whatever I can and do whatever I can with the time that I have left on this planet to contribute to the greater good. And when I think of the greater good, I can't do this alone. But if I can get the right mission-aligned investors to back me, I can do a lot more stuff that a weird little guy from Canada living in Norway could never normally do. Having those investors with the mission alignment allows me to do a lot more things and scale things up. It just so happens that I also live in this little town called Ulsteinvik, which is actually one of the main maritime centers in Norway and in the world, where we have massive scalable maritime industries surrounding us. So any technology or any model or any concept that I develop for the oceans, I could scale up to global scale by leveraging the industry that I have within 30 minutes of where I live. So when I put all these factors together, I think, okay, what can I do to contribute to this planet and leave the planet a better place than when I started? Is really to focus on the oceans. I have the tools, I have the resources, I have the investors, and I have my own drive. But it all kind of culminated to who I am today. And so, yeah, I am dedicating my time and my life to finding scalable ways to restore the oceans and hopefully inspire others to join the cause and yeah, make the planet a little bit of a better place than it was when I first was introduced to this place. So I think given the limited amount of time, I thought I would kind of stop there, and hopefully this will help trigger more conversations about restorative business models. And I would love for us to stay in touch and let's connect on LinkedIn and love to hear about all the other restorative ventures that are out there that maybe we could also support. Thank you.
Brian, huge thanks. Such a fascinating insight into the work you do, and like hearing your motivation and why you're doing this. It's truly, truly inspiring. Just a reminder to those of you that joined us late, if you have questions for Brian or any of our guests, you can put them into the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, and we'll share them. We'll share them with the panelists. What a start to Nature Futures 25, listening to you talk about restoring the blue, our